Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Let Them Eat Cake. I am Jack. My co-host today is John, and today we will be interviewing Sonia, an Oklahoma-based anarchist, activist, and organizer who tells us about life as a street medic, explains how organizing works in practice, and all the way to LGBT concerns in the state, as well as expanding on the Next Benedict situation and Chaya Raichik, aka Libs of TikTok. But before this interview, we have some headlines for you. Okay, headlines. Spain first. So on Sunday, the 12th of May, we saw the Catalan regional elections take place across the region. Historically, the politics of the region have been rather complicated, but basically all you need to know is the pro-independence party has had the president for the last two elections. This year, the Socialists won the presidency with 42 seats, up from 33, with the Independence Party going from 33 to 20 seats, and Together for Catalonia, which is another party, going from 32 to 35 seats. It has been theorized that the recent economic upturn has reduced the appetite for pro-independence sentiment to the point that this could be the end for the modern push for independence. This will be the first time in 4 decades that the nationalists have not been able to form a majority, but the socialists will still have to compromise with the Independence Party to form a coalition.
Catalan independence movement is something that, because I love me autonomous movements that I've covered for a while, and the events that are going on there, and the economic downturn that came from the EU, like Greece was falling off the map not too long ago. Spain also was hit really hard. So the conservatives being in power, it was kind of like a fringe thing that happened, kind of like how Donald Trump just came out of nowhere and it threw a wrench into everything, right? So they're kind of like in their post-Trump phase now, that it's kind of a return to normalcy phase, because the Independence Party in Catalan aren't the ones who have the majority in those Catalan elections. So it's more going back to like how it used to be in Spain. Also, it's at the same time, they have a whole corruption scandal going on with, I'm not sure if it's president or prime minister, but whoever gets the votes in the parliament guy, the socialist, right? So like his wife like embezzled money and shit like that. And so they're like, so it's just like we have Goldbar Menendez, where he's like, it's only my wife who did something wrong, not me. It's totally fine for her to do it. The Supreme Court justice, my wife hung that flag.
Yeah, it is a bit like that.
Yeah.
So
I'd say that's the summary, as it's a return to normalcy.
Okay.
The independence movement is probably not going to go much further for a while.
In Georgia, we've seen a slew of protests over the last few weeks due to a proposed implementation of a Russian-style anti-foreign agents bill, which would see any NGO or media outlet labeled as a foreign agent if they get more than 20% of their funding from overseas. They will also be required to register with the state as a foreign agent. My question here is whether funding from Russia has to be classified as a foreign agent as well.
Well, here's the thing.
I would be very interested to ask that question of somebody.
Here's the thing. Russia can't afford to be doing that. Now, well, people always ask, it's like, this sounds like just a transparency law. I don't understand. I wish we could get somebody from Georgia on, but I guess just because they're so CIA controlled, they won't talk to us. The one part of it, not just like being a copy of Russian style laws that have been used in the past, one side of it is that, believe it or not, the people in Georgia who are protesting are pro-EU. So when you get more than 20% of funding from that country, you basically enter into like almost a criminal class. They make you do a bunch of different things, right? It's like it basically suppresses people from getting more than 20% of their funding, effectively just basically killing NGOs in general.
Yeah.
And so NGOs are obviously something that are used for soft power all over the place. But the thing is, it's just like Euromaidan, where the goal was to get to the EU. Like, these people want to be in the EU, so you just remember that, Jack, next time you say, like, why would Northern Ireland want to stay in the EU? There's people dying to be in that shit.
This law passed on Tuesday, the 14th of May, with a vote of 83 to 30. This bill will now progress to the country's president, who has said she will veto it. This won't matter, as the same party that passed the bill can hold another vote to override that veto. So it seems kind of pointless to even have this power. Yeah, as I said, ultimately it feels hopeless for the Georgian people and comes as a shock considering the social move towards the European Union as of late. Expect a lot of Russian propaganda claiming these protests are Western backed, as the Georgian Rose Revolution was, of course, as we all know, that it was a joke. There is an upcoming election, but an apparent lack of opposition within the country makes the Georgian Dream Party, the party who passed this bill, unlikely to be unseated. So over to the Pacific now. French colonial rule has resulted in another uprising, this time in New Caledonia, situated off the eastern coast of Australia and north of New Zealand. The unrest and violence was spurred on when French Parliament voted in favour of a bill allowing French settlers of New Caledonia, who've lived there for over 10 years, to vote in the country. The concern is that this dilution of the native Kanak population's voting power will reduce their hard power in their own country. This vote in the French mainland did not go over well in New Caledonia, which is supposed to be autonomous from France and their only autonomous territory, with others only being semi-autonomous or considered extensions of France
Yeah, I was about to say,
themselves.
or basically considered extensions of
Um,
France.
yeah, so this meddling with New Caledonian laws understandably resulted in unrest, as they were told that it's autonomous. In response to the unrest, French authorities have launched upwards of 1,500 cops in order to regain control over the island, potentially sending more from France with Macron, who is coming to New Caledonia. When asked, the High Commissioner of the Republic of New Caledonia, Louis Lefranc, said Republican order will be re-established whatever the cost, which juxtaposes the positions of the presidents of the French overseas territories, which, as I mentioned before, is considered legally France. They all denounced this action in an open letter.
Just like with the foreign agents bill, there are some surface level takes that I think you could produce from this. Like, wait, so if they've been there for 10 years, why shouldn't they have the right to vote, right? Because most people don't think about active colonialism, of course.
Yes.
So
it's like these people come from France to make money, to have dominance over these people in this area.
And this place has a lot of fucking money.
It's nickel, I think, is what.
So that's what that's what brought everyone to the island in the first place, is the nickel deposits.
Yeah.
There's parties like this in a lot of places, especially people suffering from colonialism. Like there's like a more extreme party in South Africa than the ANC, which has been like Mandela's party.
Always will be.
Right. So, I think you should be suspicious of parties that literally call themselves, they try to flip it around like you won't notice by calling it social nationals, but guess what? So I think it's kind of funny that the party who's leading the protest are National Socialists, and the nationalism they have is not mythic nationalism. It is more of like unified the island regions, like, not just our island, more of a greater Albania type of nationalism is kind of what they have. Then there's this weird connection with Azerbaijan that the social nationalists assure us is not happening, even though they're carrying Azerbaijan flags in these protests and stuff. And that's where I think things get really weird, because France just claims, technically without any evidence, that Azerbaijan is involved, while they go and wave Azerbaijan flags and have Azerbaijan shirts. So, and it's not like the first, like, I don't know, like, why is Azerbaijan doing this to France? Why is Azerbaijan funding this territory all the way over here?
Yeah.
They're just they're hard to read, because, as last I checked, all they did was kill Armenians. It makes me suspicious when Azerbaijan pops up places.
Okay, so to Israel, the IDF has resumed raids and strikes in the north of Gaza, with renewed claims that Hamas has returned and recollected their forces in the north. This is because what Israel does is they go in, decimate the area, Hamas just hides, then they move on. You need
4 AC-130 gunships circling the area to prevent regrouping.
So it's basically, the IDF will go in, fuck shit up, leave, and wonder why.
It's almost like it's
more
intentional.
People, like, exactly. So it's kind of interesting that these actions, and then they're like, oh, well, look at what you made us do, sort of thing. It's literal physical gaslighting. They're creating a power vacuum by annihilating the literal social structures, and then being like, "Look at all the problems." This is what they're doing. So this follows operations into towns on the outskirts of Rafah, which is now escalated, I believe, into actual deployments into the city of Rafah, where the majority of Gaza's displaced population is and is now no longer. This comes as a US after the US feigned care by blocking an arms shipment, then immediately sending $1 billion worth of arms after.
Why is that? Because I think this is the greater context as well, is that this report, and like anyone who's watched us long enough knows my history with the bombing those 40 kids in Yemen, and how that changed a lot of things for me, and how I looked at the US, and the fact that Trump actually scaled back shit, that we were able to put enough pressure onto the weapons in Saudi Arabia from that Trump listened, of all people. That's for some stuff I kind of liked Trump on foreign policy.
Yeah.
You know,
Not
on other stuff, no. But
Yeah.
the report, the investigation that they're doing, oh my God, please just don't, like, you got to just be upfront. Just classify the investigation and delay its release, you know, until after the shit's over. If you think it's going to be like a political bombshell that's going to stop weapons to Israel, right? I don't know. It's just the United States said that going into Rafah was going to be a red line unless they saw a cohesive plan.
There is no cohesive plan.
And Blinken has continuously said, we have not. He's like, have you seen that plan? We have not. That's what he says every time.
Yeah.
Right? Now they're softening their dialogue, and the theory is it's because Israel has done these limited contingent operations in Rafah. They haven't, even though they showed like amassing vehicles to like do an assault. So the U.S. softened their rhetoric because I guess Israel didn't genocide too hard on these last recent operations.
Yeah, so, and an update to this is the International Criminal Court has applied for arrest warrants for 2 Israeli leaders and 3 Hamas leaders, including Netanyahu. Naturally, Netanyahu has refuted and denounced the ICC like an actual child.
It would be like if George Bush got charged for stuff
Exactly.
after 9/11, is what he said.
Yeah, exactly. Hilarious. So this is continuing to attempt to justify his assault on the Palestinians and outright genocide, pretty much in Gaza, as clearly the ICC thinks so. The US, as is expected, also denounced the ICC, but also added threatening to sanction the ICC as well. So that's pretty fun.
But anyway, with the package being, they delayed certain weapons that are stuff that would have not been useful for Rafah, that they couldn't be trusted with, right?
Yeah.
We continued selling weapons to Saudi Arabia right when we fucking banned certain bombs from them getting. We scaled back arms to Saudi Arabia, and certain types of arms that have been used in unethical ways specifically. We scaled back those. But guess what? We still have them as a number 1 arms buyer. So to think that, like, oh, it's just fake, the United States sent things over, like, sure, it's going to help Biden anyway, because now he can't be criticized for not loving Israel enough. The arms are going to go no matter what. It's just the U.S. gets to choose what they're going to get, just like how they fucked over Ukraine by not giving them more Patriot batteries in this last package. More Common America L.
Oh, talking about Ukraine, Sergei Shoigu has been reassigned from defense minister and replaced by a civilian, former deputy prime minister Andrei Belousov, who specializes in economics.
Wow, a regular Ashraf Ghani. Wow, you mean there's an economist who wrote a book on how to develop nations, so you put him in charge of a, high command in the Afghan government, and then gave him the presidency, and he fucked everything up? Wow, crazy.
Putin announced that he decided that it was time for a civilian to run the Defense Department instead of a military man. Shoigu has been moved to the role of secretary of the Security Council.
Can we talk about how that makes no sense? It's like putting your dog in charge of your Air Force.
Yeah.
Air Marshal Frou-Frou.
This replaced incumbent Secretary Nikolai Patrushev. Shoigu will also acquire roles overseeing Russia's war machine. Gerasimov and Lavrov, 2 other notable heads of the Russian government, will remain in their positions for now. To Chad, Chadian elections concluded with ex-presidents Ex-President Idris Deby's son, Mohammed Idris Deby, announced as the victor of the May 6th elections. Despite controversy in the lead-up, Prime Minister, I don't know how to say this name, the main challenger of Deby Jr., announced himself the winner in an announcement made on Facebook, which is very funny. On February 28th, security forces murdered the leader of the Socialist Party Without Borders, Yaya Dillo. No investigation has been done into the murder. Violence broke out, killing a man attempting to vote in the southern city of Mandu, while celebratory gunfire after voting had been completed ended up killing 9 people, as reported by local sources.
This sounds like a cool country to me. I think in America, after you vote, they should let you just blast a 50 cal into the air. You know how many people would come to vote just to shoot a big ass gun?
Probably a lot.
Yeah. Look,
Every
if the
vote gets you 5
Republicans were
seconds of
actually
a
a real
minigun.
party and not obstructionist, I could get somebody on this platform and show that it's a valid way to get voters to come out.
It's actually, I actually agree. You get 5-second press of a minigun.
I think the 50 cal shooting in the air, and then
Dangerous.
after it lands on like some old lady.
But yeah, so this theoretically legitimizes the military junta into a civilian government, specifically in the eyes of the international community, and probably more importantly, ECOWAS.
Well, I mean, sure, everyone's like, okay, pal, but yeah, I would say ECOWAS is the important thing here, and also because with the entire Sahelian region, I mean, even Senegal is looking to move closer to the, I guess we'll call it the Mali Federation at this point.
Yes.
So we reported on Senegal a little bit in the past on their elections, so we'll see what happens there. But I think what's important with Chad is that in Niger, Americans are pulling out because of the coup, and they're going to Chad, most likely. Nobody has confirmed this, but this is what a lot of analysts are saying, is that they'll probably be in Chad, right, to do counterinsurgency things, which means that they're going to have to spend more money on gas when they fly their planes a little bit further. But the Deby Senior, he was a famous African dictator. So I think Deby was number 3 behind this guy. So and then Cameroon is the highest now.
Okay. Where was he? Equatorial Guinea.
Yeah, this is Equatorial Guinea. Okay. So
interesting.
And so Deby is a very notorious leader. This dude fought Gaddafi. So Chadian politician, military officer, served as the 6th president of Chad from 1991 to 2021. So this guy literally died on the front lines of battle, which is crazy that a world leader to die in a war like that. Because he I don't know if he was there seeing the troops, or he actually fought for to give them motivation.
Yeah.
He actually won his term.
I support this action.
And then
all world leaders should be on the
year.
Front line. They should put world leaders on the front line. Because if they want to wage the war, they should be on the front line.
So this is so funny. So there's anti-election protests. So to act like he is the true leader, instead of giving a victory speech, he went to command the Chadian soldiers in person on the front lines fighting the northern rebel incursion. So it was by this people called FACT, Front for Change and Concord in Chad. So it's funny because everyone says that he was killed by ISIS, but he wasn't.
Really?
He was not killed by ISIS. I'm still on this. I didn't flip the thing. Anyway, I don't know how much that'll include, but anyway, Deby was a notorious leader. And the fact that he died on the front line is very interesting. So the prime minister, who is his opposition figure, who claimed that he won, not Deby, he has now resigned. Well, probably ousted, forced to resign or something, and he'll probably turn up dead in a ditch.
North Macedonia has elected its first female president after the former leading party, the Social Democratic Union, suffered a devastating defeat in the May 8th election. Gordana Siljanovska, a university professor and opposition presidential candidate for right-wing VMRO DPMNE party, I only made the acronyms because the actual pronunciation of this is impossible, who won 65% of the vote, with the incumbent winning only 29%. In Parliament, this party-led coalition won 43% of the 43% of the vote and 58 of 120 Parliament seats, giving them just short of a majority. Despite just falling short of this sees a shift in North Macedonian politics. The coalition government taking power allegedly breaks a deal with Bulgaria that was conditional for North Macedonia's ascension to the European Union. Yet another hurdle that Macedonia has had to overcome in its long journey to the EU membership, which could explain the shift from the socialists to the right wing. The most recent Bulgarian deal requires North Macedonia to mention Bulgarians living within the country explicitly within the North Macedonian constitution. So they want them to change the constitution to recognize Bulgarians in the country, and this party opposes this concession, and it's creating issues. This is my opinion, but I think it's kind of ridiculous that Bulgaria wants this country to change its constitution just to enter the EU.
Only reason I would argue for it is if it mentions other groups besides Bulgarians.
It's just Bulgarians.
Yeah. So
from what I can find, it's just Bulgarians.
So if while I agree it's bullshit, I think that a reasonable compromise was just list them all. Just list all the groups and just list them all, and then be like, and everyone else.
Yeah, just being like people, North Macedonians, and everybody else.
Yeah,
not that hard.
Well, no, I mean like all the ethnic groups, they would go down the line, in the
constitution.
Yeah, and then just in case more arrive in the future, and they go and anyone else at the end.
Yeah, so that's all for the general sort of May summary of news stories, I guess. Now to the main story, which is the Internal Displacement Monitoring Centres yearly index on the number of internally displaced peoples.
Yeah, it's worse than ever.
Yeah, exactly. 4.8 million more IDPs than 2022, with 75.9
I just remember
million.
Being blown away by how bad it was with Syria and at the height of it.
Yeah. So this is going to be a massive info dump, but it's the key information that I could get from the actual index.
Skip to this time code. I'm not putting the time code in.
So, 46% of the global IDPs, 34.8 million of them, were found in sub-Saharan Africa, with Sudan accounting for 26% of them, roughly 9 million. The DRC accounted for 19.3%, which is 7 million people. The report says that together they accounted for almost half of all conflict displacements worldwide.
So we see all these people saying, along with Free Palestine, is free Sudan and free the Congo. And from my investigations, I got to give it to Democracy Now! Because she interviewed a guy who actually was giving accurate information on why free Congo is important and talking about the M23 rebels, which we've covered extensively. Go watch past episodes, But the displacement is coming from groups like the M20, specifically them. There's others, but specifically M23, which is backed by Rwanda, and Rwanda is backed by the United States. So if you're going to implicate the United States in supporting something that's oppressing the Congo, that's what I guess you would say. But from what I've seen, everyone I asked where I go, what do you mean free the Congo? What's going on there? None of them even know what M23 is. They've never mentioned it to me. I've only seen it from that Democracy Now! Interview.
That's very funny.
So they're just supporting something because they're told to, is basically what I've gathered. So I don't think they even know the stats on how bad the displacement is in the Congo. Yeah. There's also conflict minerals, but that's another thing. And then Sudan, obviously, we've been reporting on Sudan since the outbreak. And we said from the start that it's going to be debilitating with displacement, right? And just the capital city of Khartoum, right? Just because of it's like in the Afghan war when the resistance fighters were left to their own devices and shelled their own capital to pieces, of course, because I talk about how it's like people think of Sudan as they don't realize that how developed it is. Like the Darfur region is very underdeveloped, but the main city, it's like a modern city. Like anyone would be able to be comfortable there.
Yeah, like every time I see a video and it's on stream of Sudan, I'm like, "Hey, roads!"
Yeah, 'cause that's the
And it's
joke
like
because people
Khartoum is
don't
like
think
a
that that's
very
it's because of
civilized,
South Sudan.
massive
South
city.
Sudan has an
Yes.
extreme underdevelopment, so people think that's what
Yeah.
Sudan is, even though it's more like Egypt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just imagine a war that debilitating. Egypt's even worse, like because the
Mhm.
chiral population density, because it's all the density in Egypt is insane. Just
Yeah.
imagine how debilitating displacement would be if a war took place in Egypt,
In Cairo
in
specifically, it
Cairo.
would be
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah, so this figure is actually up 4% from 2022, as I said, and is up for the fifth year in a row. So we're doing pretty well. North Africa and the Middle East accounted for 20%, 15.3 million of IDPs, up from 12.8 million in 2022. This is the fourth increase in a row for this region. The major jump in 2023 is due to the full-scale assault launched by Israel into Gaza following the genocidal acts committed by Hamas on October 7th, accounting for 3.4 million of its 15.3 million displaced people. This is going to get worse as Israel continues its genocide and as America continues to facilitate it. This number this year's number will likely be higher for this area. As well as obviously
Yeah, because
natural disasters.
this is only the end of 23 where this report comes
Yes.
from.
Yeah. So Syria still accounts for 7.3 million of the total 15.3 million displaced peoples in this area specifically, showing that Assad's control continues to screw over the country and is leading to further suffering,
Also, I
um,
should say that even with
among
Syria
many other factors.
specifically, there's a lot of issues with external people. So, like
Mm,
Lebanon, it's a mess right now with Syrian
yeah.
refugees because people don't want the refugees there. And
Hmm.
Turkey, it's also pretty bad, but Lebanon specifically is really bad right now
Yeah, they
with
don't
how they're
want the
treating them.
Syrians.
Yeah.
And then this is followed closely by Yemen with 4.5 million still. East Asia and the Pacific saw 4.2 million people displaced, 2.9 million from conflict, 1.2 million from disasters. The overwhelming majority of this number is Myanmar, accounting for nearly all conflict displacements, with 2.6 million, with the smallest numbers in Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Indonesia. This highlights the issue of climate change in the area. And this is as we transition from like the Middle East and North Africa, where most of the conflict is, we'll see the displacement numbers transition from conflict to natural disaster. This highlights the issue of climate change in the area and what we're going to see in the coming years and how much risk countries like China are in, as they have the second highest number of internally displaced peoples in East Asia with 640,000 people, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that area only has
There's more people
4.2
there,
million.
you know.
It's an eighth of all the displaced people
Yeah. But there's just a
in
more
East
people in
Asia.
China, so it's
Yeah, so
and
we're
also
we're
as you're
naturally
about to
gonna
say,
well, we also realistically these numbers may be lesser than like most numbers. I take most numbers from China as a low ball.
well, a lot of these are probably way higher.
Yeah. So most of China's issue just comes down to, as you've said, their biomes, just the sheer
Well,
amount of
I didn't say
biomes
that. I
they
was going
have.
to let you add to it because you are.
Well,
I
yeah,
saw it written. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the population and just how many biomes there are. The river floodplain as well
yeah.
from the
So
Yellow
there's
River.
just a lot of stuff in that country that can displace people,
Yeah,
and the
statistically,
government.
it's statistically you're most likely to die from a natural disaster in China, just
Yeah,
because of how big and how many biomes there are.
yeah, and they have that government. You think you're getting help? It's not happening. Afghanistan continues to top the IDP numbers in South Asia with a total of 5.7 of 8.2 million total displaced peoples. The nation accounts for 4.2 million of 5.3 million conflict displacements and 1.5 of 2.9 million disaster displacements. This further reinforces that what we've been saying for a long time here about Afghanistan, that it's one of the countries most at risk of climate change, and nobody really gives a single thought of it. And especially during the El Nino system we're currently in, Afghanistan is going to get hit pretty hard. So we'll see what happens there, but it's not looking good so far. I think Pakistan was also pretty up there with
Pakistan and Afghanistan are both pretty much the highest.
And finally, in Central Asia, we've seen a total of 7.2 million displacements, with Ukraine obviously accounting for most of them, with 3.7 million. We also see Turkey with about 2 million, with 822,000 being disasters. I'm not sure where these displacements come from. I'm assuming they're Kurds.
Well, there was that earthquake that almost lost
No,
Erdogan the
not the
election.
disasters. I'm talking the 2 million. So a million, the million other displaced people, because there's 822,000 and then around, I think it was like 1.96 million total. So I'm just wondering where that million people displaced comes from, and I feel like it might be southern Turkey. But Azerbaijan also accounted for some of this displacement, likely due to Nagorno-Karabakh that happened, I think, later last year. This is actually down from 2022, but up from 2021. So silver linings, I guess. I don't know, but yeah. So that's all the key information that I could glean from. Although
Well,
I don't think I covered
because are
Europe
you talking about
anything.
Nagorno Karabakh? There's been less violence this year. The main war was the year before, so that's why it's down.
Yeah. So, but just
like how
general,
Ethiopia
Asia
was way higher in the past years. Now Sudan is the high one.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's it for that. I guess we can link the actual index if people want to look it up. But it's the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. It's their index, so just look them up. We should be good. And do you want to throw it?
Yeah. So now we're gonna do a pickup, because when we did the interview today, basically the news of Next Benedict's death came out that night, right after we finished recording. So we wanted to update and talk about that beforehand, because it's like something that's clearly missing from the interview when we're talking about Oklahoma and Chaya Raichik and things that happened there. So it's like, it shows how accurate and how well that, knowledgeable and wise she actually is that she's highlighting this as a specific thing that's a problem in the state, and boom, right when we finish recording, she's proven right.
Yeah.
So
it's rough, but clearly we were right on it. This is something that needed to be spoken about. So
I think I should. I still am editing it because we do so much streaming now. I'm so behind, but I wish I could say we already have the next episode on Patreon right now. It's not gonna take me long to get up there, but it will be up this week. So
yeah. Hopefully we can increase number.
But that episode is going to be really cool because we're talking to somebody who unironically supports the Taliban, and they're not like a whack job, and they have valid reasons for why they support them and things like that. Because it would be very hard to find somebody who has like valid reasons for supporting Putin nowadays, right? Like
I feel like you could find
haven't
some
been
Russians
in power long enough where you can really be.
Yeah, I feel like you could find some Russians who could probably justify it, like nothing's bad happened to them, sort of they've just kept their head down kind of thing.
Maybe.
But like that would
I could definitely see it with like people like Erdogan, But there's very few. There's very few, I think, that are like this, where the person is actually very pragmatic and actually is a normal person. They're not a like gaslit psychopath. They acknowledge, like, there's nothing we disagree on, like events. Like we agree on all the defense. It's going to be a very cool one, so keep an eye out for that. And here's the fantastic episode about that will teach you how to organize and all this stuff. Hopefully inspire you to get out and change your community. When we recorded, it was literally the day that Next Benedict died, I believe.
That was the day that we recorded. Later that night was when the news came out about it.
Okay.
I think it was like a week before, but the news about it came out that night after we recorded. That was the first time that I started seeing the news saying that they had died.
Anyway, now I can put that at the beginning when we kind of cut into it, because their death was basically ruled nobody's fault.
Yeah.
What did they say specifically? Because even I was saying, like, even if we believe the medical report, there's also things here like, what about how a head injury amplifies this medication? Like, how does a head injury affect things? Like there was too many conclusions, because I think it was something like antidepressants and Benadryl is what they determined was the cause of death.
Yeah, so Prozac and Benadryl, which Prozac, it's impossible to kill yourself on Prozac. There's no way. Just for antidepressants, they're specifically made so that you cannot kill yourself by taking your antidepressant. That's the way that it goes. They were going to go back to the doctor the next day, and then they died. So it wasn't that they died in their sleep. They woke up, and then but as I had talked about previously, when you have a head injury and a brain injury, it takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to build up enough pressure in the brain to cause death. And this is why when we say that if someone has a head injury, that you don't leave them alone for the first 24, 48 hours, that you watch them like a hawk, because the pressure will slowly build and build and build, and you won't know it until 12, 24, 48 hours later, and they die.
Because from what we were aware of, because I know that there's a lot of semi-accurate bad reporting with a lot of inflections, like they're implying things that we don't actually know, right? But as far as we're aware, we know that their head was repeatedly bashed into the ground, I believe is the wording that was used.
For 2 minutes. For 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that is a long fight. Yeah, as a person who is trained for hand-to-hand, 2 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a fight at school that lasted that long.
Yeah, it's a long time for it to be happening. And it was both. There was two. It was Nex and their friend that was there. So we do have,
and we know the time because of the cameras, and the cameras have time codes, and we can see the exit and enter.
So we have a first-hand account that we could go and ask about. Whether this person wants to give that account or not, I'm not sure. We also have obviously the account from the people who did the attack, but they're not going to tell the truth, are they? And the school's not going to tell the truth.
The authorities and the police and the school is withholding the identities of those students. Of course, they're still children.
I mean, they're minors.
So it's like they have to dance around that. Then you've also got the issue that you were talking about before with the medical examiners and the causes of death. And we've seen just in the last couple of years multiple instances of cases, as you were saying, like George Floyd. I was going to point to Tortuguita in the Stop Cop City thing, where the Georgia State Police pretty much just executed them.
Yeah,
they ruled it. They planted a gun allegedly, and had I think it was like 60 bullet wounds in the body. Something like that.
And they did a ballistic analysis that his hands were up.
Yeah,
all of this stuff, and the report still comes out like this, and people believe the police report because they got it out first, because the people who were closest to them,
the police lie to us.
Yeah, and the people closest to them did get it out. They just don't have big enough voices, and this is where the issue comes.
With human psychology, whatever information someone hears first, they hold very tightly to that information, and then even if new facts come in, they just disregard it because it creates that weird belief disconfirmation paradox where you just can't accept new information. And the cops know that, and they take advantage of it. They have the media right there with their microphones ready to hear what the cops say, and people believe them, even though we're shown day after day that we definitely should not believe the police, because they're legally allowed to lie to us in order to get whatever they want to accomplish.
So can you?
But I was mentioning that other student. I can't remember it's Reggie something. I think he was a young black kid who his death was ruled a suicide, but he was found rolled up in a gym mat, vertical, head down, feet up, and that was ruled a suicide. And he had contusions all over. Same as Nex. Nex had contusions all over head and body, and those things get disregarded.
So why? I would ask why, but I think we all know why.
I mean, go ahead, ask why, just because it's rhetorical.
Sure. Okay. Why do they do this? What is their purpose of covering up stuff like this?
In the case of Next, the narrative that these people here in the the Oklahoma area, I live 20 minutes away from where Next was killed. It was really intense. The local authorities and the police and our anti-trans folks, including Chaya Raichik, it's important to them to continue keeping the narrative that trans people are the bad ones, that trans people are the ones that are like out to get people, the ones that are violent, the ones that are trying to do evil. And this doesn't match their narrative. And so to continue that narrative, they have to cover up all of the anti-trans violence that happens, whether that's direct violence like we saw with Next, or whether that's just harassment and abuse of trans people until they just eventually do take their own lives, which again is a deliberate action by these anti-trans bigots, these transphobes.
Yeah, because we see them, they always say join the whatever percent as a sort
then
of
you
way
just
to get around
respond with follow your
too.
leader and reference Hitler.
Yeah.
But with this case specifically, there's the initial police body cam. Because of how the events turned out, the cop essentially says because you splashed them with water, they're allowed to kill you.
Yeah. The self-defense laws in the southern states is very interesting, especially Texas and Oklahoma, especially when it comes to trans people. We still have trans panic laws that defend somebody if they thought that some woman was hot and then found out that she's trans, and then this guy like kills her. He's most of the time going to get off on the trans panic defense laws. It's absolutely set up here as an active like a new form of social murder, really.
I don't imagine a lot of cases where somebody's death is justified because they splashed somebody with water.
It's not justified, but it's a way for police and for the school system to shirk responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if
it's victim blaming.
If it's a well-loved person that gets killed, they're going to do everything that they can to try to like seek justice. And if it's someone that they want to, conveniently pretend that it was just like some kind of an accident, or that it was justified, or that it didn't happen, or that they killed themselves, then that's the story, that's the narrative that they're going to give out. And it's unfortunate and embarrassing that people believe it without question.
Yeah. Okay. So any last things?
I just look that there's a Queensland still has gay panic legal.
Mm-mm.
It says exceptional circumstances, but what the fuck does that mean? So that's pretty cool. Go Queensland. Fucking hell. But it's not a surprise considering we only legalized gay marriage in 2018 in Australia, something like that.
It was around that time for us too. It wasn't
so,
that much
so fucking late.
Earlier for us.
No, I think it was a couple years earlier.
No, it was during the Obama admin, so that would be like 2010 to 2016.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Something like that. Anyway.
Were there any updates on the next thing other than it being ignored and basically
ruled a suicide and successfully covered up?
There haven't been updates that I know of since then. As you know, I've also been kind of out of the game a little bit.
We can transition into that from this as well.
Sure, because I don't know of any other updates after that. It just we know what happened, and there's really not much we can do. So yeah, but then I ended up being out of the game for about the last 6 weeks up until very recently.
You had lymphoma, correct?
I had been having a lot of symptoms for a long time and getting a lot worse and having more pain, more nausea, losing weight. I've lost about over 100 pounds now. And, doctors had been ignoring it. And I ended up in the ER back to back. And then eventually they just did like a full body scan, and found that I had lymphoma. They did a bunch of biopsies, and it's an extremely rare form of lymphoma. It's like a B-cell, non-Hodgkin's.
Yeah, I remember trying to look it up and being like, I've never heard of this type of thing.
So fewer than 250 people get it any given year in the US.
Oh my God.
And it's almost unheard of in anyone under 60. The average age is 70. Obviously, I'm not 70. And so it's just, it took so long for them to even, come up with the diagnosis. But yeah, I was in a hospital in the cancer ward for like 2 weeks until they were finally able to get me stabilized where my heart wasn't going into AFib because I was super malnourished from not being able to eat. That I was just like near seizures. My heart was just like doing weird stuff, and they were able to get the pain under control. And now I'm doing outpatient chemo, but I've been having to beg the community to donate money because this is a massive amount of, this is a very expensive illness to have.
Right there at the bottom on the banner.
Yeah.
So
yes, please.
So the link will also be below for people. So I think we're good. Thank you so much for taking time to come talk.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me on.
I'm sure if we have any subjects that come up revolving around your expertise, we'll probably reach out again.
All right.
Or regular contact in general. Yeah.